Dear Elliot, this is Celia, your long-lost connection from Western. To jog your memory, I was our band's...
You can't even get through.
Welcome to 32 Thoughts, the podcast presented by the GMC Sierra AT4X. Dom, Elliot, Kyle, all with you after a 14-game night on Thursday in the National Hockey League. So a lot to get to there. There were blowouts. There were incredible moments, big offensive performances, so much going on. Elliot struggled to keep his mind on which goaltender for the Maple Leafs he was trying to talk about when reporting news after the Leafs-Ducks games. I don't blame you. There was a lot to keep track of.
Oh my God, that was ridiculous. First they said Joseph Woll, and it was Stolarz. Then I called, and Nick Kypreos came into the room. He was waiting to watch Craig Berube's press conference. He said, "You got the wrong goalie." So thanks, Nick, for pointing that out, or else I wouldn't even noticed. And then I called him Alex Stolarz.
Yes.
And Kyle, I have a rule that, you know what, if you're going to be that clueless, and it's really not that big a deal, it's not, but if you're going to be that clueless, let the people use you as a piñata. So I was like, you know what, take me apart. I'm good with it. I meant Anthony, but have your fun.
Yeah. Yes. The comments were superb. So well done taking a knee on that one.
They never let you down in those moments. If you say to people you have carte blanche to rip you, they rarely do a bad job of it.
That is very true. So we'll get to the Stolarz Toronto story in a little bit, Elliot, but why don't we start in Vancouver? That was a huge win for the Canucks. They blanked the defending champion Florida Panthers, Kevin Lankinen's third shutout of the season already, but the big story going into it was the return of JT Miller almost a month after he took a leave of absence for personal reasons. He was back in the lineup in the morning. He stated he was back. He told to the media there in Vancouver he didn't want to talk about anything about why he was gone and the circumstances around it all. Just wanted to talk about hockey. It was a neat moment once the puck dropped there on Thursday night. The JT Miller chants early in Rogers Arena and late as Vancouver and Miller skated to a huge victory.
I've thought a lot about this whole thing over the past couple of weeks. First of all, trying to be sensitive to what Miller was going through, but just the overall situation. As you said, Kyle, that was a great victory for the Canucks. I still think the Florida Panthers are the Eastern Conference favorites. To me, they won last year, but they have established this year that the Eastern Conference still goes through Sunrise. And more importantly, still goes through that pretty good outlet mall right next to the arena. That's the
Sawgrass
big key.
Mills.
That is the big key here, of course. So, to get that 4-0 win, that's a great win for the Canucks. They got on them right away. They scored 2.5 minutes in and pretty much were in control. That one was not in doubt to me. But you know what else that game said to me, Kyle?
What was that?
JT Miller is still the emotional leader of the Vancouver Canucks, and especially where their fan base is concerned. Right now, they love their players. They love Hughes, the fans do there. They love Pettersson. They really love Garland. They love Besser. They like all their key guys. But nobody has the emotional connection to the fan base that Miller does right now. And part of it's the way he plays. Part of it's because of what he just went through. But he's got that link. Like when that wrestling card was there, the WWE was there, the fans are yelling JT Miller during the card. And so that is hard to fool around with. Canuck fans can tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't see another player that has that same kind of connection to the crowd. Now, that changes over time, and there are other players that can eventually replace that. But when a player is at the height of their powers with that, it's you move on from them or you change them at your own peril. You have to make sure there's someone else. Like when the Bruins won the Stanley Cup final, that guy was Lucic. Like he was the emotional supercog to the Bruins and their fans at that time. And you go and you take a look at all of the teams that win the Stanley Cup, there's always one player that's kind of that emotional linchpin. And I think you always wonder when a player comes back, does that change? And I think we learned on Thursday night that does not change. And this wasn't easy on anyone. This isn't easy on Miller. This isn't easy on the Canucks. This isn't easy on the organization. Like nature abhors a vacuum. And Kyle, in particular, Vancouver abhors a vacuum when it comes to their hockey team. Those fans are insatiable. They want Canucks news. They want to know what's going on. And as a result, there was a lot of stuff that got rumored, which was not true or didn't need to be discussed or went over the line. Like, you take your pick. And Jim Rutherford came out and he got mad. And whatever the case is, like, I think everybody, including the Canucks, were wondering when Miller got back, what would it all look like? And I think what we learned is that in the short term, this is not going to be a problem. Like if the Canucks came out and they got spanked by the Panthers and Miller was terrible, then I think we'd have a problem here. But they came out, they were excellent, they won convincingly, and I think what you learned is the connection is still pretty strong. And we'll see where this goes over time, and we'll see how things develop over time. But you couldn't have had you look at Vancouver this week, they had a couple of really important returns. They had Demko come back, and they had Miller come back. And, you know, what happened is they lost the game to the Blues, which was unfortunate, but they got a point out of it, and they won this game against the Panthers. And I think the Canucks will take that. And I think what they'll particularly take is that Demko got out of the game okay, and Miller got out of the game, that the spiritual connection between him and the fan base wasn't broken, and the team, which had played well in its absence, played well in his return. Like, there's a lot to like about what happened to the Canucks this week.
Especially when you consider, for some bizarre reason, they've struggled at home multiple times throughout the year, but Thursday night had to have been one of the most convincing results that they've had at Rogers Arena this season. And it's funny you mention all that. Like, you think about last season, they got off to a great start. They stayed relatively healthy until the playoffs, of course, but they were able to ride so much of what they did early on into a really special regular season that had them first into the division. Hasn't been that way this year. They've had to grind a little bit more. But as you say, two important pieces back this week. So you mentioned in your blog that came out Thursday night,
the Leafs center dilemma: who can strengthen the roster? If you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan like me, you know the team's center depth has been a constant concern this season. With Auston Matthews set to return from a mysterious upper body injury next week, the excitement of having our star back is palpable. However, there are still serious issues to address in the center position to keep the team competitive and, of course, fuel our playoff dreams. David Kampf, a key piece in the center rotation, is sidelined with a lower body injury. As if that weren't enough, Kalle Jarnkrok is still recovering from surgery, leaving another gap in the lineup. Max Domi, expected to be a versatile asset, has been placed on injured reserve, further aggravating the situation after missing consecutive practices due to lingering pains. To sum it up, the Leafs are missing 4 functional centers, and the pressure to act is mounting. James Myrtle, a respected Leafs analyst and contributor to The Athletic, highlighted a series of potential trade targets to address this dilemma during his appearance on the J.D. Bunke's podcast. Among the names mentioned, two stood out: Nick Jugstad and, for the nostalgic fans, a possible reunion with Ryan O'Reilly. Jugstad seems to be Myrtle's favorite, and for good reason. The player, who signed a 2-year deal with the Utah Hockey Club last offseason, carries a manageable $2.1 million cap hit, which is essential for a team as salary cap-strapped as the Leafs. Additionally, standing at 6 feet 6 inches and weighing 205 pounds, he would bring not only physicality but also consistent offensive contributions. Jugstad is the most viable option for the Leafs right now, Myrtle stated on the podcast. And he's right. Experienced and versatile, Jugstad has played for several teams, including the Florida Panthers, Pittsburgh Penguins, Minnesota Wild, and Edmonton Oilers, and could quickly adapt to the Leafs' dynamic. With an affordable contract and a solid track record, he offers a practical solution without sacrificing too many future assets. However, it's impossible to ignore the possibility of a Ryan O'Reilly return. Yes, we know he chose the Nashville Predators last summer in search of a quieter environment, but the Leafs management still holds him in high regard. The 2019 Stanley Cup-winning captain with the St. Louis Blues is precisely the type of player any contender would love to have on their roster. However, the cost of bringing him back would be steep, both in terms of trade assets and cap space adjustments, as Nashville or a third team would need to retain part of his salary. I don't think the O'Reilly scenario is entirely out of reach, Myrtle said, showing that there's optimism within the organization. However, there are doubts about how much it's worth investing in a 33-year-old player, even with his impeccable credentials. Meanwhile, cheaper internal options like Steven Lorentz, Connor Dewar, Pontus Holmberg, and Fraser Minton have been mentioned. But let's be honest, these names might serve as short-term stopgaps, but they're far from offering the stability and impact the team needs. The pressure is all on GM Brad Treliving. He knows that despite the Leafs' solid performance so far, the center position is crucial to sustaining any championship aspirations. With the trade deadline approaching, Treliving has likely intensified his efforts to finalize a deal. And we, the fans, are eagerly awaiting good news. For now, all we can do is trust that the team can weather this tough phase and hope a solution, whether it's Jugstad, O'Reilly, or another name, arrives before things spiral out of control. After all, as we all know, the Leafs don't have the luxury of wasting another season with a promising but incomplete roster. The time to act is now. The Leafs center dilemma, expanding on the potential solutions. The Toronto Maple Leafs, amidst another promising yet tumultuous season, face one of their most pressing challenges, addressing a depleted center lineup that threatens to derail their momentum. While the return of Auston Matthews is a beacon of hope, the broader picture remains dire, requiring urgent action from the front office. With Kampf, Jarnkrok, and Domi sidelined, the team's depth has been stretched thin. The immediate impact is clear on both ends of the ice. Defensively, the Leafs are struggling to suppress opposing top lines without reliable two-way centers. Offensively, puck distribution and power play setups have been less dynamic, as the makeshift lineups lack the same chemistry. This imbalance underscores the necessity for reinforcements. Nick Jugstad, as highlighted by James Myrtle, presents the most realistic trade option. His affordable contract and towering physical presence align perfectly with the Leafs' needs. Beyond his imposing stature, Jugstad brings versatility. He can play both center and wing, a flexibility that would allow head coach Sheldon Keefe to adjust the lineup dynamically. However, acquiring Jugstad isn't without complications. The Utah Hockey Club, formerly the Arizona Coyotes, is currently rebuilding but may still demand a premium return for their experienced forward. The Leafs will likely